Good morning! On the last day of the decade! Oh, goody goody gosh. Yes, it is December 31st, 2019. It feels weird to say the least, because things don't really feel different. But when I look back, they certainly are. So I thought, as sort of a special goodbye to the decade, I would do a brief stroll back through my memories of all the big things that happened to me in the past decade that have ultimately changed my life. Because there certainly have been changes. Most of my post-secondary education has actually occurred within this decade. Who would have known? So, yeah, let's take a look. Look inside my head. I don't really have a lot of, I'm not going to be showing off photos or pictures because I prefer, when I do show pictures, that everyone in them has given me permission, and that's a little hard for me to do with the sheer number of people between high school and my many post-secondary things so far. So it's just me talking. You're welcome. I think most of you, if you watch this channel a lot, are used to that. Looking at you, Rach. Okay, so let's go back to the start of the decade with 2010. Now, 2010, I'm actually midway through my grade 11 year of high school, keeping in mind that I am from a place where we don't have middle school, so high school goes from grade 9 to grade 12. So I'm over halfway through my high school career at the start of the decade, and March break of 2010, I go on my first, and only if you don't include the United States, international trip. I actually went with a group of folks from school to a whirlwind 11-day trip through Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic. And wow, Neuschwanstein Castle is definitely my favorite memory from all of this, and I actually decided to shell out the money so I could have a horse-drawn wagon ride down from the castle because it's up a steep hill. And quite a few other people joined us, so I ended up actually sitting between the driver of the wagon on the front stoop and a very nice woman from China. And here we are in the middle of Germany at like a fairy tale castle talking about the fact that her son is doing university in Canada. So that was just really cool to do. We ended up visiting salt mines that actually crossed between two countries, and you never realized when you crossed the border and back, because when you're underground you think it's a straight tunnel. It's not. And I even got to see the beautiful Mozart Plaza and spent a lovely afternoon drinking some tea and eating some snacks there. It was a lovely trip. Like I said, whirlwind. I would love to go back and spend much more time in each of the countries to see far more than that. We get home, and I'm back to, high school. My high school career wasn't super great for me. A big problem is that I had yet to be diagnosed with my anxiety and depression, which I have been diagnosed with now. So I didn't really understand what was going on, but I definitely felt like the hanger-on from the group. I'm that person who didn't get invited to parties, so Monday mornings were super awkward when I would walk up to my group of friends and they'd stop talking because they were talking about a party that happened on the weekend that I hadn't been invited to. That's not to say that all my friends were like this. I definitely had some close ones, and when we get into grade 12, they ended up actually changing my life and my school trajectory with some of these people. But due to an issue that actually occurred late in my grade 11 career, things weren't looking super great for my grade 12 year. So I thought, you know what, time to make things different. When I started grade 12 in September of 2010, I decided that high school wasn't the end of it, university was coming, and I was going to make my applications look good. So I joined every club that sounded vaguely interesting. I was part of the outdoor club, and we ended up doing a hiking camping trip that year, and into 2011 actually did a snow trip where we slept in cabins. I joined the prom committee and helped throw our prom dance event. I joined yearbook. I was actually the editor for the yearbook. If they needed something cheesy written for the yearbook, I wrote it, even though I felt like an imposter and felt like I was lying through my teeth, because you have to write things about how high school was amazing, and my high school career really wasn't. And of course, I threw myself into classes. This worked so well that into 2011, in my world history class, our professor would hold these water summits, and basically everyone is a country, and you're debating the water issues and trying to figure out how to form alliances so that everybody gets what they want. And 2 days before the actual summit, basically you have discussion periods with everybody. And our teacher warned us that if you're not talking at these summits, then you're in trouble, because you're basically the guinea pig that everyone's going to go against. And we were the guinea pig, so I was like, how about no? And I just dug up all the dirt that I could, and literally spent this water summit just sniping everybody that came at us. We won! We were the outcast team, and we won, because I was like, if I'm going down, I'm taking all of y'all with me. And that's kind of how I ended up just seeing my grade 12 year. Like, if I'm going down, everyone's going down with me. But I also didn't want to go down, so I joined all these clubs. I start going to university panels, trying to figure out what university I want to go to. For the most part, I'm focused on Ontario universities. And then, late in the fall, my best friend of high school looks at me and says, will you come with me? We're on spare, we've got nothing to do. And he says, all the East Coast universities are set up in one of the gyms. I want to go, I don't want to go alone. Will you come with me? I'm looking for biosciences. And I was like, you know what? Let's go. So we go to this fair, and we're looking for biosciences. And I hit a table with a woman with the same name as me. And I say, we're looking for biosciences. And she goes, we're a purely liberal arts university. And I go, tell me more. And my life changed. Like, completely changed in that moment. Thank you to this particular friend for getting me to go. My life changed in meeting this other Angela and hearing about this university. I continued to look at other Ontario-based ones, but really my decision was made when, for Christmas 2010, the university sent me a Christmas card. An absolutely beautiful winter picture of their campus. And I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. This town is killing me. This place is killing me. I have to do this. Mom, Dad, I have to do this. And neither of them wanted me to go that far. It's about an 11-hour trip straight. But they saw how hard I was working for this, so they said, yes, if you want to do this, you go ahead, you work for it, and we will support you. So I put in my application. I did apply to other universities, but this was the one I was banking on. And early in 2011, I am studying for a history test, the same world history class, world issues class that the Water Summit happened in. I'm studying for the final, no, not the final exam, for a test in the class. And there's a phone call. And my mom picks up the phone and says, sure, I'll get her. And she holds the phone and she says, Angela, you've got a phone call. And I say, can you ask them to... And she goes, Angela, you want to take this phone call. And I found out I got into my university. And I managed to not cry until I got off the phone. But then I cried. So March break, grade 11. Grade 11 is previous one. March break, grade 12. My parents and I hop in the car and we make the 11-hour trip out to the university where we had set up a meeting. And they let me sit in a class that was watching The Princess Bride. And it was a rainy day as we're driving up. But we get on campus, and the clouds broke, and the sun came through, and I went, I'm home. This is where I want to be. And my dad later admitted, and it took him a couple years to do it, but my dad later admitted that he had wanted to discourage me from this. He didn't want me this far away. He wanted to point out everything wrong with the campus when I got there. And then he saw me get out of the car and start to cry. Happy tears. He saw this realization on my face that without even knowing what would come in the next 4 years, I had found where I wanted to be. And he couldn't point out anything bad. He started just ramping me up. He started pointing out everything fantastic, how beautiful the campus was, how self-contained it all was, how beautiful some of the rooms were. When I got out of this class that I sat in and talked about the excitement I had of being able to talk about things like The Princess Bride and books that I loved, we sat down and paid the deposit for my dorm room right there. And the trip to the campus changed my first choice for dorm rooms. I decided to go for the all-girls dorm room. Another choice that would ultimately change my life. We drove home, and I spent a lot of the rest of grade 12 just telling myself that I had somewhere I was going to go that was going to be so much better for me. That I didn't need to hate myself anymore. So when I graduated, when I crossed that stage in June, it was with pride. Because I had survived, and I was going to some place that would change everything. Over the summer, they released the roommate assignments, and a girl named Rach started emailing me. We were going to be roommates, and we were so excited. And it turns out both of us had some of the same issues. We weren't the popular ones at school. We were the ones who felt like we were third wheels and hangers-on, and we didn't want that anymore. We were nerdy. We tended to go to bed very early and get up pretty early too. We were introverts that sometimes just wanted somebody there that when we laughed at something in a book or on the internet, we could tell them about it. At the start of September 2011, my parents and I packed up the car again. I was squeezed in with a mini fridge and my teddy bear and what felt like too little and too much of my life. And we drove all night to arrive back at my university first thing on moving day. Because I will tell you with universities that the further you are away, the earlier you're going to show up on moving day because you leave with so much more time to spare. So my parents and I move me into our little two-person dorm room. And it is tiny, but it turns out it doesn't feel tiny. You don't need that much. And my parents had to leave pretty quickly. My mom at the time was a teacher, so she had classes to start. And they cried when they drove away, but I was a little too focused on the fact that my entire life was unfolding before me. I met my best friend Rachel in person for the first time. And then playing a game of Hunter in the Woods, I met another good friend when she sacrificed herself so that I could get away. And she actually then met Rach because she helped Rach get sticks out of her hair. And I started going to classes. I had taken this special class they offered called Great Books. It combined literature, philosophy, and political science. The first book I read for the class, really the first book I read for my degree, was Homer's The Iliad. It was worth it. It was worth it. So I finished 2011 mid-year, my first year of my degree. Flew home for Christmas in the middle of the night with my friends actually getting up to say goodbye. I couldn't wait to get back in 2012. And I finished my first year and I thought, this is where I want to be. Summer of 2012, I worked my first legitimate job at a museum. Finally sucked it up and read Deathly Hallows for the first time. Cried a lot. We started our combined YouTube channel to keep in touch. And in September of 2012, I returned for my second year. Still not quite sure what I wanted to do for my degree, but I was having fun. Now, my BA wasn't without hiccups. Nothing ever is, but it's definitely one of the best times of my life when I look back on it. So second year went from September 2012 to spring of 2013. I worked at a new museum for that summer. And then headed into third year. Now my first 2 years I was in theater. Did The Importance of Being Earnest first year and Gut Girls second year. Third year, well, theater kind of fell through. And third year, I guess, would have been my bumpiest for everything. And then September 2014 was the start of fourth year. I had decided in third year that I was going to do an honors in great books, which meant I needed to do another major. So I decided to do another honors, obviously. And in third year, I wrote my thesis proposal on Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I spent the summer while I worked at the museum going through the entire Meditations, looking at the topics I wanted to talk about and pulling out the important quotes that I thought were needed. And then I started fourth year and I was like, let's do this, and decided to be director of a production of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, because I'm nuts. I'm crazy. So fourth year, I wrote a thesis. I directed Dr. Faustus. We might have accidentally summoned a demon at one point. We put the production on in the more early English style. It wasn't in a proper theater. It was in sort of this communal round space in the bottom of one of the buildings. And it was fun. In the last production, we saved Faustus. We gave him a chance at redemption and he took it. And people enjoyed it well enough we were actually asked to give a encore performance for a club in a proper theater this time, which we did. Going into graduation that year was a fantastic feeling. There were a couple of us who made it, some who didn't, but we were so proud of where we had gotten and where we were. And even my brother came up for graduation despite having a horrific head cold that made him look like he was going to die and feel like he was going to die, but he was still so proud of me for getting my degree. And my best friend Rach and my good friend Caroline actually baked goods and fundraised so that I could get a T-ring. I won Best Great Books Thesis out of 2. And I was the only one in the entire graduating class who had a double honors. Her reading off my card, she just looked at me and went, "Really?" And I was like... But everything wasn't perfect. I had applied to some master's positions and had been told no. So, graduation, May of 2015, might have been a high point, but the summer, when everyone was moved away, was a low point. I really struggled with my depression and my anxiety that summer, because I didn't know what I was going to do. It felt like I had just been on this fantastic rise, and everything ground to a halt, and I had nowhere to go. So I walked bike paths a lot that summer. I read a lot in the library, and I was really lonely. There were definitely some nights where I fell asleep with the laptop on playing Game Grumps episodes because I wanted to hear somebody else. Rach came to visit me. She was looking to move into the city, so she stayed at my apartment, and we went looking for an apartment for her. And she found one that she liked. And I thought, that's just perfect. I've spent the summer by myself, and then I'm heading back to Ontario, moving back in with my parents. My mom came up to help me move, and the day we finished cleaning my apartment, I got an email from one of my professors. She had been talking to the professor who had been my thesis advisor and said, I heard you didn't have anything happening this year, so would you be my teaching assistant? And I thought to myself, you've got to be kidding me. The apartment's packed up. One teaching assistantship is not enough to live on. And my mom said, well, do you know of anyone else who needs one? And I remembered another professor tended to have one. And I said, maybe? She said, email him. And I said, but we're moving. And she said, we'll figure it out. If this professor says yes, then we will figure it out. So I email this professor. And then I moved back to Ontario. And the day we arrive in Ontario, this professor says yes. And suddenly I've got 2 jobs at the university I love, with professors I love, with my best friend moving back into the city, and I am 11 hours away without a home or furniture or anything, and the worst chest cold I'd ever had. It turns out I'm in Ontario for 8 days. 7 of them I am on the couch. I have an overdose of medication and spend a night loopy out of my brain watching Gunslingers, thinking to myself, oh, no one better walk in right now, there's bullets everywhere. While my mother works tirelessly to get me an apartment, to get me all the furniture I need, and then to surprisingly run into an old friend of hers at a grocery store where she admits that she's a little stressed because she's trying to figure out how to move her daughter and all the furniture we have here to an apartment in Fredericton. And he says, I've got a truck and trailer, I will drive you. So in late August, early September of 2015, so 8 days, 1 chest cold, and 1 very loopy night later, we drive back to Fredericton, and I move into what is my 3rd and final apartment in the city. So this one was so fun because I didn't tell Rach that I was moving back. So we showed up, we unpacked, my mother and her friend headed back home, and I bided my time until Rach moved in, and because I had gone with her apartment hunting, I knew what apartment she was in. So I actually walked over to the apartment and hung out in the park next to it until I saw Rach getting back from a grocery trip, and I was just like, ta-da! And it was fantastic. So for the sort of 2015 to 2016 school year, I acted as a TA. Fantastic time, really did give me the sense that I wanted to be a professor. I really enjoyed the classroom environment, learning new things both from the professors and the students. It was really fun. Along with that, I did revamp sort of my applications for master's programs, and I ultimately got into one in the prairies. So I had a nice year, ended up seeing a friend's thesis defense, which was really nice because she had seen mine. She asked the most difficult question, and all the professors were just like, really? And she was like, I thought it was an easy one. They were like, no. And I was like, no. But I got to see her thesis defense, and she kicked the stand on that one. Whoops, sorry. She introduced me to Hamilton, which ended up being just the music that I listened to for the entire rest of the summer, just on repeat. I spent the summer hanging out with Rach, some other friends when they were around, and taking a lot of mornings to head out till a lake shortly outside of the city and having some swimming time, which was really nice until people showed up, and then I was like, eh. And I also served as a research assistant during this time. So the summer, I actually helped one of my professors reorder her office. Spencer's the Fairy Queen will never be my friend. I would always get all the books sorted, and I'd be like, perfect, figured it out. And she'd be like, found another copy of the Fairy Queen. And I'm like, where am I gonna put that? Where am I gonna put that? Rearrange everything to fit the Fairy Queen. And it was really kind of funny because she would definitely get texts and she'd be like, okay, can you put these out on the, like, free-for-all cart? And I'd be like, She'd be like, what are you doing? And I was like, they're free-for-all, right? And she was like, okay, yeah, good point. So, just collect some text. Key thing if you're a professor, especially if you're an English professor, collect all the anthologies you can, because there's a very limited number of pages you can photocopy out of one book for your class. So if you have a lot of anthologies, so once the end of summer there hit, that was also the summer Rach and I were at the art gallery selling some art and some cookies. I also did a yard sale to ease off on the furniture because I was moving back into a dorm halfway across the country. Yep. So after some tearful goodbyes, hopped in the car, drove back to my parents' house in Ontario, repacked everything, and went out to actually visit my brother in Alberta and some family out there, then ended up at my university for my master's. This program was very hard for me. It wasn't like my Great Books program, which had involved English literature. It was in social and political thought, a lot of focus on the political side of things on that one. Again, I served as a TA, which was nice, but from 2016 into 2017, it was a harder time for me because I was very isolated and very sad. My parents had sold the house, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And there was some discussion of, like, my parents moving to the city that I was in, as we could share an apartment as I wrote my thesis. But I was lucky enough to get a thesis advisor that was very supportive. He and his wife were both professors that I had, and both of them were like, it seems like this area is not a good fit for you. And I was like, the place, physical place. Like, I did enjoy the program. It was missing some things, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to put literature back in. I'm writing a thesis about Aristotle and Harry Potter, and no one can stop me. And they were like, yeah, but this city is not a good fit for you. And I was like, figured that out. And they were like, we are okay, and we encourage you, write it long distance. We are okay doing that. We are good with you doing that. So my parents actually got an apartment in the city I'm now in. I moved in with them in the spring of 2017 and started writing my thesis because I had finished my classroom year, 2016-2017. Write my thesis. Write that thesis. Write my thesis. I'm also working during this time. I started at a boat museum, and then I ended up at the tourism office, doing walking tours and ultimately selling tickets that I've worked until this past year at. So I'm writing my thesis. We're just like, yeah, okay, great. We send it to my external. It's the person outside the university who is usually an expert in the field who could tell you whether or not it's ready to defend. And she said no. And I was like, absolute devastation. Complete, total devastation. At this point in time, we're sitting early 2018. And I have a very good cry. And then I realized the key thing that I should have realized a lot sooner, but I hadn't. Which is, when you're working on a project like this, you have to recognize that no one in your team wants it to fail. Everyone wants it to succeed. So if somebody's telling you there is an issue, then you need to address it. And why I say I should have realized this a while ago is when I look back on it, my thesis advisor for my BA thesis was very good at doing this and doing it subtly, so I didn't always notice. Where she would redirect things because she'd be like, if we go over there, that's going to be problematic. Let's go over here. You're better in this area. So I had a very good cry. I had a very good rage. And here's the other key thing. Do not do that in front of your team. Like, that is a private thing. That is with friends and family. It is not a professional thing. And I'm glad I realized this. I never did this in front of my team, which I'm glad. You gotta stay professional. So we regrouped, we figured things out, and I sucked it up and took the criticism seriously. And that was the best thing I could have done. Like, you can be upset about it, you've got to take the criticism seriously, and you've got to address it. So in revamping my thesis, we again submitted it, this time about mid-2018, and she approved it for defense. So November 2018, I flew back to the university and defended my master's thesis and was absolutely terrified. What's really interesting about this is people are like, oh, so you've defended before. How was it? And I can honestly tell you, I can't remember most of it. I can remember the basic setup, but that's because we went over that before my thesis defense. Like, they're going to ask questions. I'm going to answer each question. Each professor is going to have the chance to ask questions. Then we're going to do a second round of questions. That way people can ask additional questions if somebody else asked a question and they had something to attach to that, or felt I had said something that then brought another question. Basically 2 rounds of questioning. And then you get sent out of the room so they can discuss whether or not you're good to pass. And I can't remember any of that. All I can remember is a BA student sitting down with me in the hall, because I was literally sitting in the hall shaking with my head between my knees, and she was like, I don't feel you're safe, so I'm gonna make sure. And I was like, just defended my thesis, I'm freaking out. And she was like, let's breathe a bit. So we breathed a bit. I was good. She headed off. She had a class to get to, and I was like, I'm very sorry if I made you late. And she was like, nah, being late's not important. And I passed. My thesis advisor didn't even tell me getting back into the room, so I was just like, and they were like, congratulations. So I was like, so I passed? And they were like, yes. Okay, thank you. About that time, shortly afterwards, I had my first allergic reaction to penicillin. We found out that's an allergy I have. And then I worked my way into 2019. In that sort of switch between 2018 and 2019, I put out applications for PhD programs because now that my thesis had passed, I knew I was actually going to graduate so I could do a PhD program. So I put out applications and then officially graduated with my master's in January 2019. If you want a fuller reflection of this particular year, you can always check out my previous video where I reflected on 2019. But big things that's happened this past year. I finally got my G2, got 2 wisdom teeth pulled out, also got into my PhD program. So, yeah, we started the decade mid-high school, and now we're ending the decade mid-PhD program. I'm not super deep into it. 2019, like I said, was the start, so I've done half of my classroom year so far, so going into 2019, I have more classes to look forward to. But considering I was mid-high school and I'm now at PhD level, this decade has been absolutely amazing for me school-wise. I've learned a lot of things academically, I've learned a lot of things professionally within the academic world, and I've made some of the best friends that I will ever have. I met some fantastic people, and Rach has been with me through all of this the entire time. We met each other very early on in the decade. We were roommates for 2 years. We've supported each other through all the city changes. She was the first person I texted when I realized what I wanted to write my master's thesis on. She was actually the first person that found out I had been accepted to my PhD program. So, this is a decade of meeting and spending time with my best friend, of finding out what I want for my career and working on the credentials I need to get it, learning a lot of fantastic things, writing some very weird, different theses and papers, and just having a fantastic time. I don't know fully what the next decade's gonna bring, but if it's anything like this one, there's definitely going to be some low points, but there are also going to be some fantastic highs. And I'd rather focus on the positive things than the negative things. Here's to another decade. See you in 2020. Yes, I will start the year off with a video tomorrow taking a look at what I'm hoping for 2020 moving forward. So I hope if you're celebrating tonight, I'm actually heading to a pajama party. I hope you have a nice time, be safe, don't drink and drive, celebrate with people who make you fantastic and feel celebrated, and we'll see everybody in the new year. Peace, guys.